Book Nibbles. Big Ideas, Small Bites. Peter Attia's Outlive. The Science and Art of Longevity is a deeply personal, evidence-based, and sometimes counterintuitive exploration of how we can extend not just our lifespan, but more importantly, our health span. The years of life we spend active, independent, and free from debilitating disease. Unlike quick-fix wellness books or glossy promises of miracle diets, Attia's work is a hard-hitting, nuanced account of what it really takes to outlive the chronic diseases that most often kill and disable us. He pulls from his medical training, his years as a surgeon and physician, his later shift into preventative and longevity medicine, and his own struggles with perfectionism, burnout, and emotional health, weaving together a story that's both scientific and profoundly human. Attia starts by reframing the problem. Most of modern medicine, he argues, is medicine 2.0, a reactive system designed to treat acute illness and late-stage disease. If you have a heart attack, modern cardiology is excellent at saving your life. If you are diagnosed with cancer, oncology has advanced tools to treat it. But these interventions often come too late. Most people spend their later years slowly losing mobility, cognition, and independence, enduring a prolonged decline before death. The goal of Medicine 3.0, which Attia advocates, is to proactively delay or prevent the onset of chronic diseases, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, so that we not only live longer but live better. Longevity, he explains, is not about avoiding death at all costs, but about reshaping the trajectory of our final decades so that vitality lasts until the very end. One of Attia's central concepts is the 4 horsemen of chronic disease, the 4 categories of illness most responsible for premature death and prolonged suffering: cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative disease, and metabolic dysfunction. These are the conditions that cut life short or drain quality of life, and they share overlapping risk factors. By addressing these risks early, often decades before symptoms appear, we can dramatically change outcomes. Attia often contrasts this with how doctors traditionally think. They wait until blood pressure is dangerously high or until blood sugar is at diabetic levels before intervening. But the processes that cause disease start years earlier, silently progressing. Atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque in arteries, begins in young adulthood. Insulin resistance starts creeping in long before type 2 diabetes is diagnosed. Plaques in the brain associated with Alzheimer's can accumulate for decades before memory loss begins. Medicine 3.0 means not waiting until the fire is raging, but preventing the spark from ever catching. One way Attia helps readers visualize this is by asking them to picture their marginal decade, the final 10 years of their life. Imagine yourself in your 80s or 90s. Can you still carry groceries up a flight of stairs? Can you play on the floor with your grandchildren? Can you go for a hike, drive safely, or remember the names of friends and family? For many, the answer is no. But the decisions you make in your 40s, 50s, and 60s will determine whether your marginal decade is one of independence and joy or frailty and dependence. This framing makes longevity visceral. It's not about abstract years tacked onto life, but about the very real physical and mental abilities you'll have when you're old. Exercise, in Attia's view, is the single most powerful tool we have for shaping the marginal decade. More powerful than any pill, exercise builds a reserve of strength, endurance, and resilience that pays dividends later in life. He presents compelling evidence. Cardiovascular fitness, measured by VO2 max, is one of the strongest predictors of lifespan, with higher fitness levels associated with dramatically lower risk of death. Muscle mass and strength are similarly protective. Sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle, is a major cause of falls, fractures, and dependency in older adults. Attia calls exercise a drug, with the most robust benefits and few side effects. But unlike a prescription, the dosage is up to us, and most people underdose. Attia breaks down exercise into 4 pillars: stability, strength, aerobic capacity, and anaerobic performance. Stability, often overlooked, refers to balance, mobility, and coordination. Strength means not only lifting heavy weights, but being able to perform functional movements like squats, carries, and pulls. Aerobic capacity is about building a high base of endurance through steady-state cardio, while anaerobic performance involves shorter bursts of high-intensity work to push the upper limits of heart and lung capacity. He urges readers to think long-term. It's not about hitting a short-term fitness goal, but about training now for the demands of later life. One of his favorite questions is, what do you want to be able to do when you're 80? If you want to carry a 40-pound suitcase up a flight of stairs, you need to train your 50-year-old self to carry more than that now, because you'll inevitably lose capacity with age. For example, Attia describes designing a centenarian Olympics for himself, a set of physical tasks he wants to perform easily at age 100, such as lifting his grandchildren, getting off the floor without help, carrying groceries, and walking uphill. Then he reverse engineers his training to meet those demands. This practical vision turns the abstract goal of longevity into tangible daily motivation. It's not about six-pack abs or marathon medals. It's about functional independence. He shares stories of patients who transformed their lives by adopting strength and endurance training in middle age, showing that it's never too late to build capacity. Nutrition is the second cornerstone of Attia's longevity framework, though he approaches it with humility and nuance. Unlike many wellness gurus, he admits there is no single perfect diet for everyone. He spent years experimenting with ketogenic diets, intermittent fasting, and low-carb regimens, sometimes with extreme discipline, but eventually realized that rigidity can backfire. What matters most is metabolic health, the body's ability to manage glucose, insulin, and lipids effectively. Insulin resistance, which precedes type 2 diabetes, is one of the most widespread and damaging metabolic problems, increasing risk for heart disease, cancer, and Alzheimer's. Preventing or reversing insulin resistance, therefore, is central to longevity. Attia advocates for individualized nutrition strategies based on continuous monitoring of metabolic markers. He often uses continuous glucose monitors, CGMs, with patients to see how different foods affect their blood sugar. Some people can tolerate rice or bread without large spikes, while others cannot. Rather than rigidly prescribing one diet, he encourages readers to experiment and observe. However, some general principles emerge: avoiding excessive refined carbohydrates and added sugars, prioritizing protein intake to support muscle maintenance, and not overeating calories. He emphasizes the importance of protein, especially for older adults, who often underconsume it, leading to muscle loss. For many, aiming for 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is a helpful benchmark. Fasting and time-restricted eating get a careful analysis. Attia practiced rigorous fasting for years and saw benefits like fat loss and improved biomarkers. But he also acknowledges potential downsides, especially for people who push it too far. Fasting is a tool, not a universal solution. It may help restore insulin sensitivity or aid weight loss, but long-term adherence and overall nutrition quality matter more than any fasting window. Attia's balanced perspective is refreshing. He avoids dogma and instead emphasizes experimentation, measurement, and sustainability. Sleep, often neglected in discussions of longevity, gets equal attention. Attia admits he once wore his sleeplessness as a badge of honor, sacrificing rest for productivity, only to realize he was sabotaging his health. Poor sleep undermines every aspect of longevity. It worsens insulin resistance, raises blood pressure, increases inflammation, and accelerates cognitive decline. Attia shares practical strategies for improving sleep hygiene, keeping a consistent schedule, limiting light exposure at night, especially from screens, keeping the bedroom cool and dark, and avoiding caffeine or alcohol close to bedtime. He also highlights the importance of diagnosing and treating sleep apnea, a common but under-recognized condition that can devastate long-term health. Beyond exercise, nutrition, and sleep, Attia devotes significant attention to emotional health. This is where Outlive becomes unusually personal for a medical book. He confesses that for much of his life, he was driven by perfectionism, anger, and a relentless pursuit of achievement that left him emotionally distant and often miserable. He admits to struggling with relationships, with anger outbursts, and with an inability to feel satisfied. Longevity, he realized, is not only about physical health, but about emotional well-being and connection. Living to 100 means little if you are alienated, lonely, or consumed by regret. Attia describes his own journey into therapy, including cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and more intensive approaches, to confront his patterns. He shares how therapy helped him unpack his past, address his perfectionism, and cultivate healthier relationships. He insists that emotional health is as vital to longevity as diet and exercise. Chronic stress, unresolved trauma, and loneliness are potent killers, increasing risks for heart disease, dementia, and early death. Addressing these factors requires courage and humility, but it pays off in both quality and length of life. By sharing his struggles, Attia invites readers to see longevity not just as a biological project, but as a deeply human one. When it comes to medical interventions, Attia offers a balanced, evidence-based perspective. He is not against pharmaceuticals or advanced technology. On the contrary, he often prescribes statins, blood pressure medications, or metformin when appropriate. But he insists these should be part of a proactive strategy, not desperate last resorts. For example, he recommends tracking key biomarkers far earlier than traditional guidelines suggest. Advanced lipid panels, calcium scores for heart disease, regular cancer screenings, and cognitive assessments. Detecting subtle changes early allows for intervention before disease becomes entrenched. He criticizes the wait until it's broken model of standard medicine and instead advocates for continuous monitoring and early action. Cancer prevention is particularly challenging because not all cancers are preventable, but Attia emphasizes the importance of screening. Colonoscopies, mammograms, low-dose CT scans for high-risk smokers all can catch cancer earlier when it's more treatable. He also highlights lifestyle factors that reduce risk: exercise, maintaining a healthy weight, and avoiding tobacco. Neurodegenerative disease, like Alzheimer's, remains more elusive, but here too, metabolic health, exercise, and sleep are powerful protective factors. The link between insulin resistance and cognitive decline is especially strong, reinforcing the idea that metabolic health underpins all four horsemen. Attia's approach often circles back to measurement and accountability. You cannot improve what you don't track. He encourages readers to monitor their VO2 max, strength metrics, blood sugar, cholesterol particles, body composition, sleep patterns, and even emotional well-being. This data-driven approach allows individuals to see progress, catch problems early, and stay motivated. But he also warns against obsessing over numbers at the expense of living. Metrics are tools, not ends in themselves. Throughout the book, Attia peppers in stories of patients who embody the principles of Medicine 3.0. One man in his 60s, overweight and pre-diabetic, turned his life around with structured exercise and dietary changes, gaining strength and stamina he hadn't had in decades. Another patient, a woman with a family history of Alzheimer's, took control of her metabolic health, improved her sleep, and built a robust exercise routine, dramatically lowering her risk trajectory. These stories make the science tangible, showing how ordinary people can outlive their statistical fate. By the end of Outlive, the message is clear. Longevity is not about chasing immortality or hacking biology with extreme measures. It is about disciplined, consistent attention to the fundamentals: exercise, nutrition, sleep, emotional health, and proactive medical care, applied decades before crisis hits. It is about shaping your marginal decade so that your final years are vibrant, not spent in decline. And it is about facing not just the science of aging, but the art of living fully, with relationships, purpose, and resilience. Attia's book is both sobering and empowering. Sobering, because it dismantles the comforting illusion that we can neglect our health until old age and then rely on medicine to save us. Empowering, because it shows that small, consistent choices made now, lifting weights, going for walks, eating protein, sleeping well, addressing emotional wounds, can profoundly alter our future. Longevity, in his telling, is not about living forever. It is about living better, longer, and leaving as little of life's joy and vitality on the table as possible. And that's it. Peter Attia's Outlive, The Science and Art of Longevity. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.